Welcome to Jackie's Craft Table.
Hi and welcome. I've created a simple and elegant wedding card using a small stamp set called Bridal Bouquet. I'm starting out by die cutting my panel using my favorite faux stitch die. Using a pigment ink called Periwinkle from My Favorite Things, I'm stamping the first layer of this set. There are 3 different sizes of this flower, and I'm starting with the largest and randomly stamping them onto my paper. When I purchased this set online, I had no idea it was going to be so small. It taught me to look at the dimensions before I buy a stamp set. However, I ended up really liking this little set. I move on to my medium-sized flower next, and then the smallest flower I use as a kind of filler. I'm just trying to make my flowers as evenly spaced across the paper as I can. I allowed my pigment ink to dry for a little bit, and while that was drying, I used the time to cut out some masks for these flowers. I didn't have any masking paper, so I'm just using sticky note paper here. I stamped the 3 different sizes of flowers onto it, and then fussy cut 3 papers at a time. After I mask all my flowers, I can start stamping the leaves. I'm using the lighter ink for the first layer, and for the second layer, the stems, I use my darker green ink. As I did with my flower stamps, I'm just randomly stamping my leaves across the paper. Layering stamp sets are a lot of fun to use. They add a lot of dimension to your card. After I finish stamping all of my leaves, I'm going to start taking off all of my masks. This is a fun part. I get to see what my flowers look like now with all of their leaves stamped next to them. Now I'll be stamping the second layer of the flowers. I'm stamping it with Versamark ink so that I can add a silver embossing powder to it. I remembered my anti-static powder here. It's a step I always seem to forget. I'm going to be pouring embossing powder over the whole panel, and even with the anti-static powder I used, it still stuck to some of the leaves. It ended up adding a little bit of extra sparkle to the leaves. It was one of those fortunate mistakes. I really like the look of the silver embossing powder on this card. It really added a touch of elegance to it. Here's another fun part, melting the embossing powder and watching it turn shiny. I'm going to be using another faux stitch die to cut a panel out of the center of this card. I'll attach some craft foam to it to raise it up and add a little dimension. I'll also cut out a faux stitched heart to go on top of this panel. I'm using the same silver embossing powder for the sentiment, and I'm using the sentiment that came in this stamp set. It says, "To the bride and groom," and the letters are very small. So I found that I had to press them down onto my paper with a very light touch. I'm the type who has to press down my stamps with all my strength, and when I did that with these small letters, it came out smushed and barely legible. I don't show it here, but after I assemble my card, I go back and emboss 2 hearts above the sentiment. I just felt that it needed something more. I'm trimming down my sentiment with my Fiskars paper trimmer. I cut each side into a banner shape. For the card base, I'm using a blue cardstock. I cut it down to 5.5 by 4.25. Now I can assemble my card. I'm taping down my frame first. I'm using my Tombow tape runner. I almost forget my craft foam here for the next layer, but I want to make sure to glue that down to add some dimension to the card. The next layer is my purple heart, and then my sentiment goes on top of that. Later I go back and add a piece of silver ribbon around the bottom of my sentiment as well. Thanks for watching. Please give me a thumbs up if you liked it. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel if you'd like an email when I publish my next video. Bye!